Akkor elkezdenénk ezt a mai rendezvényünket. Jó napot kívánok! Én Horn Gábor vagyok, a Republikon Intézet egyik munkatársa sok közül, nem olyan sok közül. Ez a mai konferenciánk nem jöhetett volna létre a Friedrich Naumann Alapítvány támogatásával. Ez ha tetszik, egy közös konferencia, úgyhogy itt, mint annyiszor, most is köszönjük nekik a idestova 13 éve folyó együttműködést, ami a Republikon Intézetnek nem csak pénzügyileg úgy is, de szakmailag is nagyon komoly lehetőséget biztosít. Azért tudunk elhívni komoly, nemzetközileg is jegyzett szakembereket a régióból, vagy akár azon túlról is, mert a saját erőforrásunkból erre nem lenne módunk. Tehát a mai kétforduló szekciót tulajdonképpen leginkább a Naumannnak köszönheti a Republikon Intézet, ezen keresztül önök is. A mai rendezvényünk bizonyos értelemben a folytatása talán egy hónappal ezelőtti rendezvényünknek, ahol a szamizdat történetéről beszéltünk, és egy kicsit utána a második körben újságírókkal már a fake news problémáról, és azt gondoltuk, hogy folytassuk ezt most már csak magával a hírhamisítással, a hamis hírekkel, a fake news-zal. Amikor erre a mai napra készülve végig gondoltam, hogy miről is fog ez szólni, miről szeretném, ha szólna, akkor az jutott eszembe, hogy tulajdonképpen az én korosztályomnak, és ilyen öregek kevesen vannak természetesen a teremben, az én korosztályomnak ez egész fake news probléma, ez nem egy új keletű probléma, így nőttünk fel. Tehát a mi életünk egészen 1989-90-ig erről szólt, az ember kinyitotta a Népszabadságot, a Tribunaludut, vagy bármelyiket választhatjuk, akkor a sporthíreken és talán az időjárás jelentésen kívül, bár az már nem biztos, nem nagyon találhatott azokban nem hazugságokat. Megtanultunk a sorok között olvasni, így nőttünk fel, így szocializálódtunk, és tulajdonképpen erre akartam utalni, hogy a szamizdat volt az a forrás, ahol az ember, legalábbis az én fajta ember, megtanulta, hogy lehet ez másképp is. Hogy tulajdonképpen a hír akár igaz is lehet. Én nagyon meg voltam arról győződve, amikor a 80-as évek végén elkezdtük azt, hogy akkor legyen Magyarország most már tényleg más, hogy az én gyerekeimnek már nem kell ezt megélniük. Nem kell a sorok között olvasniuk, nem kell, a média lehet egy valódi forrása annak, hogy milyen világban élünk. Nem gondoltam, hogy valamikor 30 év múlva konferenciát fogunk arról rendezni, hogy megint ott tartunk, ahol 1988 táján, 89 táján tartottunk. Csak egy személyes, zárójeles példa, mert számomra egy megrendítő időszak volt a 1986. április 30-án, talán erre is néhányan még emlékeznek, de abba hagyom aztán az emlékezést. Innen nem messze a Tabánban voltunk a szokásos LGT koncerten, ami akkor már egy hagyomány volt. Éppen aktuális feleségemmel, aki 3 hónapos terhes volt a éppen aktuális x-edik, nem olyan sok van, gyerekemmel, és ugye a csernobili baleset kellős közepén a magyar média teljes mellszélességgel mondta, hogy az ég adta világon semmi probléma, mindenki menjen ahova akar, egyen amit akar, és közben miután ebben az időszakban azért már hozzáfért az ember nyugati elsősorban újságokhoz, meg a rádióhoz tudott hallgatni angol nyelvű, német nyelvű rádiót, döbbenten hallgattuk, hogy tőlünk távolabb nem engedik az utcára a gyerekeket. És mi ott álltunk, tényleg tanástalanul, és az volt a szerencsés, komolyan fölvetődött bennünk, hogy talán ezt a gyereket akkor nem kellene megtartani. Szegény lányom Amsterdamban sikeres vállalkozó most. De komolyan fölvetődött, mert azt gondoltuk, hogy azt a veszélyt szabad-e vállalnunk nekünk, amit nyugaton hallunk, és ami itt van, a kettő között van, és akkor szerencsénkre, és innen befejezem, találkoztunk egy nagyon, nagyon normális gyerekorvossal, aki azt mondta, hogy hát ilyen bármikor lehet, és lesz is még, úgyhogy akkor majd meglátjuk, és így történt. Csak azért mondom, hogy ilyen világban éltünk, ez volt a megszokott, és most megint kezd az a megszokott lenni. És még akkor is így van ez, hogyha az ember tudja, hogy heroikus küzdelmet folytatnak médiafelületek, internetes felületek, néhány rádió, televízió, ennek az ellenkezőjéért, de a bizalom megingása rájuk is vonatkozik. És éppen most egy hasonló probléma, ugye ez az egész koronavírus ügyben, az emberben naponta merül fel, hogy elhiggyem azt, amit ezek mondanak. Tényleg ez van. valóságos az, ami történik. És akkor az ember elgondolkodik, hogy mi is a különbség. Mert azért van különbség a 80-as, 60-as, 70-es évek kelet-európai fake news ügyei és a mai fake news világ között, azt gondolom, és tulajdonképpen azt szeretnénk, hogy a konferencia egy kicsit erre választ adna. Nem a különbségre, hanem arra, hogy a mostani az milyen. Hiszen amit most látunk, az sokkal szélesebb elérésű, sokkal gyorsabban működik, és sokkal kifinomultabb manipulatív eszközöket használ, valószínűleg, hogy elsősorban a közösségi média felületek miatt, de lehet, hogy ennek egészen más okai is vannak. Rabjai lettünk annak, az én meglátásom szerint, ami körülöttünk folyik, és ez szerintem alapvetően rombolja, bennem egészen bizonyos, hogy rombolja a közbizalmat. A mai beszélgetésünkön tehát ez lenne a témánk, tulajdonképpen 3 részből is áll a beszélgetés, a konferenciánk. Az első felében Tanja Porcnikot elnök asszonyt hallgatjuk meg, aki a Vízió Institútnak a képviseletében fog a média szabadság helyzete a térség országaiban címmel egy bevezető előadást tartani. Utána egy kis időt hagyunk, hogyha kérdezni szeretnének Tanyától, tehát lehet, hogyha valakinek kérdése van, akkor azt itt föl tudja tenni. Utána következik egy kerekasztal beszélgetés, fake news a V4-ek országaiban, és ennek hatásai a választásokra. Krekó Péter a Political Capital-től, Leszek Jazzeszki a Liberty főszerkesztője Lengyelországból, Roman Márka elemző a csehországi Institute for Politics and Society, elnézést kérek, hogyha nem pontos, tőlük elsősorban, mert mondom a titulusokat, és végül, de nem utolsó sorban, Viera Zuborva a Bratislava Policy Institute-tól, Szlovákiából. A második körben, csak hogy most akkor én a műsorvezetői feladatot befejezzem, egy kávészünet után, ahol vendégeink, nem a mieink, hanem a Naumann Alapítvány vendégei egy kávéra. Egy rövid előadást hallgatunk meg Vicsek Ferenctől, aki egy új szerzeménnyel, fejlesztéssel próbál minket megkínálni, egy politikai propaganda indikátor címmel, ezt majd meghallgatjuk, és utána pedig folytatjuk Álhírek és a Politika Magyarországon című kerekasztal beszélgetésünket, amelynek a résztvevői Borosbánk Levente a média néző központtól, Böcskei Balázs az Idea Intézettől, Onodi Molnár Dóra a 168 újságírója, és Virág Andrea a Republikon Intézettől. A moderátoraink a többit elmondják, és a végén pedig már csak azért is várjanak velünk végig, mert lesz egy fantasztikus szendvics ebéd. Tehát jó szórakozást mindenkinek, és akkor átadnám Tányának a szót. Köszönöm szépen, és örülök, hogy megtiszteltek minket.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Thank you to the Republican Institute. Thank you for all of you to be here. This is my first talk that I'm giving on a boat. So this is exciting, but it's steady. So I don't think I'm gonna fall, but it's exciting to be in Budapest to talk about this topic, and as I said, to give my first talk on a boat. Today we are talking about an important subject, and I was asked to give a little bit broader perspective on it. I will be talking about a study that we do, and it's an annual study, so I will be relying on that data. And hopefully this presentation will give you introduction to the debates that will occur later, and maybe also give you some other thoughts and maybe questions that you will have later on. You may always contact me after the presentation, because there won't be enough time after my presentation. You can email me, you can contact me, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you might have today or any time afterwards. So the topic is freedom of the press, freedom of the media, freedom of expression, freedom to information. It's a very broad subject. And let me start. So this is the report that I'm relying on. It's the Human Freedom Index. If by any chance you were here at a Republican Institute where I gave a talk 2 years ago, I talked about that index at length. Today I will be focusing only on one part of that report. We have by now published five editions. The latest one came out in December of 2019, so just 2 months ago. That's the one in the middle, and the previous ones are on the side. And we are publishing this annually, as I mentioned. A very important point before I move forward is that the latest data that we have in the report is from 2017. So that has to be kept in mind when we are going to be talking about the scores and interpreting them. The Human Freedom Index. I am one of the co-authors, but I don't think it's sure. I invested in my co-author, invested a lot in this project, and also other people that have been involved and are still involved. But why is this project relevant, and why is it important? Why is it gaining traction all around the world? One very important aspect of it is this is the broadest measurement of freedom that ever existed in two ways. In the number of countries that it covers 162 countries at the moment, and it aggregates 76 indicators. Out of those 76, I do have to stress that some of them are already aggregated, which means that if we decided to put them apart, we would have maybe 150 individual indicators of human freedom. Unfortunately, you can't really see the map, but what you could see in the report very well is that the darker shades of any color that you pick symbolize the freest country. So the world that is the most free, and those that are the lighter shades of a color are countries that are not so free. Of course, there are countries that we don't cover yet, and those countries are also, they are on the map represented in a gray color. The structure of the index, just to give you a sense of where our topic is. So we have two sides to the index, personal side and an economic freedom side. Within the personal freedom side, we have 7 categories. Within that 7 categories, you can see, I hope this is pointing, this one, which is expression and information. So I will be talking, when I will be presenting the numbers today, I will be talking exclusively about this category. So expression and information category. Just to show you what these 7 indicators are, it is journalists and other staff that works in media being killed, then them being jailed, laws and regulations that influence media content, political pressures and controls on media content, access to cable and satellite, access to foreign newspapers, and the last one is state control over internet access. Now, regarding this list, as you can see within the brackets, I listed sources that we use. For our index, we use only third-party sources. That is very important information about our index. We don't put together any indicator on our own. We take a credible source, and then, of course, we treat the data, but we don't come up with these numbers on our own. So this is important to note. And within this category, there are 3 sources that we use. As you can see, the first one for first 2 categories is committed to protect journalists. Then the following 2 are from Freedom House, and the last 3, maybe you don't know. French Ministry of the Economy produces a wonderful database on many aspects of not just freedom, but other areas of our life. And we take these 3, the final 3 indicators from their database. Another point about these indicators is that, as you can see, the first four, you could maybe say this is about freedom of the press, freedom of the media, and the remaining three are more about information, access to information. So it's the other side. So it's not just, we don't talk about whether journalists and everyone that is engaged in freedom of expression through these channels is not hindered to express their point of view, but also whether people on the other side have free access to this content. This is a little bit more detailed about the two indicators that I will go back. Sorry about that. So out of these seven, as you can see, except those from Freedom House, they are all individual indicators. So it's you measure one aspect, so whether journalists are being killed, whether journalists are being imprisoned. But when it comes to laws and regulations that influence media content, as well as political pressures and controls on media content, these two indicators are already aggregated, which means that the source already looks at various aspects within that category and then creates one score, one value, which we then use. So those, the third and the fourth are already aggregated. And for anyone interested in what lies under that aggregation, I will not go into this, but there's a list that we, of course, provide in our report what it's measured under those two categories that we resort on the Freedom House to provide us data on. So now about the results. I do apologize because maybe you cannot see it, but I will try to explain as much as possible. And if there are any questions later on about it, I'm happy to elaborate. So the first slide is showing you, so the latest data is for 2017, as I mentioned. So what you see in the main tab here, so the main part of the graph, this is 2017 data. It is organized by region. So basically, we are looking at how regions did in 2017 in relation to expression and information category. I don't think this is any surprise. This ranking, we have North America and Western Europe at the top, followed by Oceania, and then it's Eastern Europe, 2017. But if you go back to any data that we were able to collect, and we do publish, you would get about the same ranking. Basically, you would have North America, Western Europe at the top, followed by the Oceania, and then Eastern Europe would be fourth or fifth. So it's like there are no big jumps in the last decade that occurred when it comes to regions. Now, unfortunately here, I don't know if you can see this part of the presentation shows what happened between 2018 and 2017. This is, we go back as far as 2008. We were not able to collect data going even further than that. So what happened between 2008 and 2017 in these regions? And here, you can see that the first three regions digressed. So if it's in red, it means it got worse. The green symbolizes that it got better. In Eastern Europe, things got better, just a little bit. But they say that the devil is in the details, right? Or we need to know the details before we can draw other conclusions from this. So what happened within the Eastern Europe, which is very important to anyone sitting in this room. This is a list of countries that we include at the moment in the Eastern Europe region. We can also call it Central Eastern Europe. Basically, it's the Visegrad, it's the Baltics, it's also the Balkans, and going also to including Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. don't be surprised, we also include Greece. There was a lot of discussion whether we should put Greece in Western Europe or in Eastern Europe. We finally decided to put it in Eastern Europe for various reasons, but please, I will note that here because a lot of people jump and say, how come Greece is in this group? So, but important to note is, so this again, the main part of the graph is showing you how things were in 2017. Now, Estonia is at the top, Czech Republic, Lithuania, Cyprus, Slovenia, and then you find Hungary here, and you find Poland here, and you're like, well, but we hear so many bad news lately, from these countries when it comes to this topic. Well, that's because when you look at this part of the presentation, you can see that these countries that we are very worried about have digressed on this indicator of freedom. So these countries are basically Hungary. If you look at this side of the graph, Hungary, Poland, Greece, Serbia, Montenegro, Russia, and Ukraine, if I remember correctly, are the countries that have decreased on this measurement of freedom. But then at the same time, which we don't often hear in the news, but that's why these kind of reports, this kind of indices are really good about, because they show you both sides. They show you where country is doing not so good as it used to, but then it shows you also countries that are doing better than they used to. And when it comes to countries that have improved in the last decade of the analysis, we can see that Bulgaria, Romania, let me see, Albania, Moldova are doing better. So they are good trends too in the region. So it's not just about negative trends. Now, since we are in Hungary, and since most of us are from this region around Hungary, let me show you the final graph, and this is about Visegrad countries, and it is the same, so it's basically the same time span, and it's there, but you can't see it, so I don't know. This is magic. I don't understand. Yeah, I don't understand. It's there, but it's not there. So if you were able to see the presentation on the screen, you would see that Slovakia and Czechia are doing more or less the same. So the situation hasn't changed, hasn't improved, hasn't deteriorated. It has stayed at about the same level. While on the other hand, Poland and Hungary have been digressing. This is Hungary, the dots. So you can see that most likely Hungary was digressing before 2008. So I don't know when actually this drop started. Just double checking. While in Poland, in 2009, things got better. We have speakers from Poland, so maybe he can explain how come that occurred. But then after 2009, there is a drastic drop. And actually, at the moment, Poland is performing worse than Hungary when we measure freedom of expression and freedom to information. And this is all from me for now. Just final remarks before I give you the floor to ask me a question, because I promised the organizers I will give some time for the questions. Why is this important? Why are we talking about it? Why is it important to have freedom of expression, freedom of the press? Well, basically, that's one of the safeguards to tyrannical, authoritarian government that is trying to encroach on our freedoms and our rights. This is not the only way to make an attempt to stop government from doing that, but it is one way. Now, some people say that they might be a government that will not try to make an attempt to curtail these freedoms. I am not so positive about it. I think any government will try to curtail these freedoms in some extent. So we are not talking about bad governments and good governments, that they are governments that will not try to do that. All governments are doing it. It's just a matter of the scope, of the extent, of actually visibility. How much it becomes public that governments are doing that. So that's my second point on that. And then my final point would be that there's a distinction between journalism and opinion making. I think this line has become blurred, or kind of, some people forgot about what journalism is supposed to be about. I think this is going to be discussed in the panels today too. It's that many journalists have forgotten what their role is, what it's supposed to be, and they have become opinion makers. And there's a difference between if you are an opinion maker or if you are a journalist. And if we then enter also these opinion makers presenting facts that they know are not true, or basically when they are not trying to present both sides to the story, then we enter dangerous territory. And this is the dangerous territory, not just of fake news, but basically misinformation that can be used for various purposes. And that is something that all societies around the world are tackling with and trying to figure out how to mitigate it. But the question is whether we are tackling it from the right angle, whether we should attack this misinformation with arguments and facts, or whether we should silence them. It's a question. I don't think we should silence them. I think we should go about with arguments, with truth, with putting ourselves out there to present why that is not factually accurate what they are presenting. So that's all from me from now. Thank you very much. I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Ha vannak kérdések, akkor tegyék fel, kérem, a kezüket, és összegyűjtjük.
Thank you. My name is Ferenc Tompa. On your last note regarding the blurring of lines between freedom of expression and making an opinion, as opposed to something which might constitute a criminal offense or whatever. Let me raise this point because just the other day, the minister for the Prime Minister's office, Mr. Gulyás, made the first warning shots that anyone spreading false information or rumors might be subject to criminal. It might constitute a criminal offense. So my question is whether you considered rumors per se in this framework which you used, or how do you deal with this issue? Thank you.
Esetleg másik kérdés, hogy akkor összegyűjtenénk.
Hi. Since you're from Slovenia, I was actually talking to one of your celebrities a couple of years ago, and he and his wife were talking about the problem of the size of countries. And the size of countries matters, of course, with press because the advertising audiences, etc. And they were actually quite scathing about Slovenia amongst themselves in front of me. I just wonder what you think about how media organizations can maintain their independence in view of the limited resources of smaller countries versus, say, Poland,
Köszönjük, illetve magyarul is fel lehet tenni a kérdéseket, hogy Tanyánál van elvileg egy fordító. I think that's enough.
Thank you very much. So regarding the first question, well, there are two ways that a state can go about false information. Basically, the first one, which is an accepted one, and it's in many criminal codes, is they are basically if anyone is spreading false information with intent to hurt another party, basically it's about defamation. That is a criminal act already. So if you can prove that, so if the injured party can prove that the information was false and that there was an intent to hurt that party, then of course that person is injured party. Now another thing is when the government or any other I would say entity comes out and says, I'm going to adjudicate whether something is false information. So it's not about a court adjudicating it, but it's like someone who self-imposed himself to decide whether something is false or not. And that is very dangerous because that can be used for other purposes. And that is a dangerous territory that I don't think any government should go into, because that is basically saying, I as an individual know what is true and what is not true, but that it's not the executive's role, the executive government branch of the government role to adjudicate on that. It's the courts. So if the courts are doing it, sure, I think it's the right way to go about it. But any other attempt, I would be very skeptical and cautious about. Your question about independence and the size of the country. Well, I kind of understood you were asking about two aspects, the size of the country and financing of these actors. I think the size of a country don't matter that much. It might be actually an advantage if it's a small country, because you are catering to listeners, viewers that you know much better versus if it was a big country and you were trying to cater masses. I don't see how that could... Maybe the question you were trying to ask about independence is because everyone knows each other and therefore there are connections and people rely on, they depend on each other. They have history with each other, then there is a problem, yes. Then you have also a question, not just about whether they are independent, but whether they can be objective, even if they try to be, even if they make an honest attempt to present a story in a projectable way. The question is whether they can do, because they are so intertwined with their circles, with everything that is going on, that it's, I think as a human being, it's hard to detach yourself from any story that also involves you, your family, and your life life being and so forth. In terms of financing, if you meant just in general, I think journalists are struggling everywhere. It's hard because also there are a lot of other people that now have become, on par with them, like in terms of the reach and the name that they have created as a source of news information, I would say. So I think it's a question. It's an ongoing question that hasn't been resolved, and anyone in that line of business will have to figure it out how to go about it. I think it's an ongoing struggle. Thank you. Any other question? Oh, we are on time. Good. Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and thank you for the organizers again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tanya, for the very interesting presentation. We'll now continue our conference with the panel discussion on fake news in the Visegrad countries. Our chairman, Gabor Horn, already introduced our guest, but I'd like to do it again if you don't mind. So we have Vera Zuborova, who sits next to Leszek here. She's the executive director at the Bratislava Policy Institute. Leszek Jezdziewski, editor-in-chief of the Liberté journal. Roman Maka, who is the analyst at the Institute for Politics and Society. And last but not least, Péter Krekó, who is the executive director of Political Capital in Hungary. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. First of all, I'd like to ask you to reflect on Tanya's presentation. I think it was very interesting, the last slide on the development in the Visegrad countries concerning media freedom. Yeah, we saw that the situation not really changed in Slovakia and in Czechia, but on the contrary, in Poland and in Hungary, the situation just became worse. So how would you interpret this data? Do you agree with these trends, what actually the data just indicated? Maybe we can start here with you, Leszek.
Right. Honestly, especially the timing. I mean, I wasn't surprised with our relative decline. What was for me very unobvious, and I can't really explain it. Perhaps we would have to dig into the data that you collected. Is that the fact that actually the biggest drops in the media freedom actually occurred in 2009 and 2013, and actually, at least the kind of common knowledge would be that, especially in terms of the public media, the biggest crisis came after 2015, where the Law and Justice simply took over and created the propaganda tool out of the public media, which were imperfect but relatively. Well, I would refrain from using the word objective. They were not really creating narratives as they now they simply serve as a tool for the propaganda of the government, and we don't see any significant drops after 2015. And I would disagree that the media landscape in Poland is worse off than in Hungary, even though perhaps you could argue that the media freedom in Hungary is doing pretty well. From what I know from takeovers and closing the popular newspaper or media portals recently, in Poland there is no lack of the anti-law and justice media. In the mainstream media, there is a big television, there are several big newspapers and weeklies. I would still say that in the mainstream media, the anti-law and justice media is stronger. The internet perhaps is different. And I believe that in the Hungary, it's a very different landscape. So yeah, that's my basic remarks, but we can perhaps discuss maybe where actually the worst stuff, you know.
So we are, according to the data in Slovakia, the situation in 2017 is just like in 2008.
Thank you for being here. About Slovakia, we were so invisible that it was okay. I think actually right now, because if all of you know, after the murder of Jan Kuciak, everything really completely changed. Also the mediascape and also the ownership of the media. Right now we have 3 types of media ownership. The first one is paying by oligarchs who are still running this country. The second is paid by philanthropes and really, let's call them pro-Europe, pro-American economic leaders like Assad or like other pro-philanthropist actors. And the third is paid by pro-Kremlin, pro-Russian forces, especially the alternative media landscape. And right now we are, I think, and this is the way why we are so stable, because these 3 actors are balancing it together. So, and we will see after the election this Saturday what happens with the media landscape, with the discourse, with the ownership, and how maybe the new coalition will be able to force the oligarchs and the media that is owned by them to act officially, normally, and formally. So this is my input in the discussion.
Roman, please, could you tell us something about the Czech situation and how would you interpret this data?
So firstly, good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here in a beautiful city of Budapest. I'm here after 4 years, I think. But about Czech situation, yeah. So as we saw, Czech Republic in comparison with other V4 countries is like at the top, and you have also comparison of this Eastern Europe region. So I think we are on the 2nd place after Estonia. Yeah, but so we don't see any like significant changes with these factors you are counting the index from. But what we see in the Czech Republic, so we are getting down in a press freedom index. Few years ago, we are in the first 20 countries, like most press freedom countries. Now we are getting down. We are on the 35th place, and it is caused because every big media was bought by some person or some groups and so on. Yeah. Also, there is the richest Czech man, Petr Kellner. He has a big business in China, and also his company paid for like PR agencies to publish positive news about China and so on. And for our information space, there was a milestone, year 2014. As we remember, this year it was a start of Russian aggression against Ukraine, migration crisis, terrorism, and so on. And many of fake news websites, mostly pro-Russian, mushroomed in the Czech Republic. So we have dozens of these fake news websites, and they are like their share is about 25% of Czechs, and it was followed also by many activities on social networks. We could see a big campaign with about 100,000 followers and big viral potential, and it was called "We Are Here at Home." It was so-called patriotic campaign against migrants and Muslims, and it was absolutely anonymous, but I did an investigation and I discovered that behind this campaign is a Czech citizen living in Dubai. So it is campaign against Muslim and Islam organized by Czech living in Dubai, and accidentally he was a professional businessman in internet marketing and PR, and this campaign was full of speeches of Vladimir Putin and content from Russia Today and so on. Yeah? And what we can see as a new factor, it's a little bit different than media, but it's a chain emails, and they are targeting mostly older people, and we saw it in year 2018 with presidential elections, and many mostly older people were targeted by this email saying that the candidate against Miloš Zeman, Jiří Drahoš, is like paid by Soros, typical story. So he wants all Africa in the Czech Republic. So he is doing some bad things with children, and his father was a member of SS, and every story you can imagine. Yeah, so it is the situation in Czech Republic. But I agree with the index you mentioned. So it is kind of stable, but with the new elements.
Peter, you're not just as a political analyst, but also as a researcher. You're focusing on hoax, fake news, misinformation. So could you tell us something about the Hungarian situation?
Yeah, I think just in a very nutshell. First of all, thanks a lot for the invitation. Very important event, and yeah, I had the honor of listening to your presentation, Tanya, 2 years ago. So good to see you here again. I will slightly disagree with a few points you raised, and agree with some others. I think what is probably the most interesting thing about media models and their relationship to disinformation is that it's absolutely not obvious. There are some, let's say, general commonplaces that everybody tends to agree, but on the other hand, there are a lot of exceptions. So these are not real rules. For example, a really diverse media, mainly in private hands, leads to less disinformation and more informed public. Let's take a look at the United States. Before the 2016 elections, almost 50% of the Republican electorate believed that Hillary Clinton runs a pedophile ring while doing the campaign. This is so-called Pizzagate scandal. And the whole post-truth logic that we've seen other parts of the world are partially adopted from the United States. There are also other opinions that I think this will be something that Tanya would disagree, that public media can be the cure against disinformation and fake news. And in not every country, the public media is as biased as in Hungary or in Poland. Let's take a look at Great Britain, for example. At the last parliamentary election, also in the Brexit campaign, we could see a flood of disinformation. And even, Facebook simply couldn't keep the pace with all the disinformation that the political parties themselves were spreading. So it's, again, not that much a cure. And I think even if we talk about the size, we can see something similar. So I first disagreed about what Tanya, you told about the size of the countries. The smaller countries can sometimes be more resistant to efforts that want to undermine, let's say, freedom of speech and so on, because theoretically, a bigger market could help the countries. It could help the, let's say, editorial boards to hire more people. There are bigger money, bigger audience. Therefore, you can be more independent. But yeah, if we take a look at the Central Eastern European region, Poland, for example, is one of the most problematic cases, which is the biggest country. So yeah, it's not this obvious. But still, with all that being said, I think Poland is nowhere close to what we can right now see in Hungary in terms of media concentration. With 500 media outlets were put in one foundation called Keshma. And it's a centralized, over-politicized, politically driven media empire that is spreading disinformation and fake news prime time. And it's not really comparable to other countries, like, let's say, in Slovakia, especially, where you have the fringe sides, but still the public media is rather strong. And even in Poland, yeah, the public media might be quite problematic, and more you can see the political influence. But in Hungary, most of the private media were taken into practically state hands and party hands, and this is a totally new quality. And when you hear stories in the public media about there was one example in the municipal election campaign that the opposition candidate back then, right now the mayor, Gergely Karácsony, went out to Brussels in order to discuss with Franz Timmermans that money will come to Hungary only if we accept a lot of refugees. So that practically he wanted to bring here refugees, and it was coming from the public media. So I think it's really something, a new quality. And we can see this state finance disinformation, I think, mostly in Poland and Hungary, but in Hungary, I think it's much more efficient, much more resourceful, and much more concentrated. I think even in Russia, you don't see this kind of centralized media landscape that we can see in Hungary, but definitely not in other countries of the European Union.
Yeah, because what Peter said, I think it's very interesting to really compare among our countries. I'm thinking about Poland and Czech Republic, for example, because we see some tendencies of private media companies in our country, like taking the pro-government stance. It wasn't like this before for one important reason, and this is the reason that actually a lot of Poles could disagree with, that our media was privatized by the foreign capital because we didn't have our oligarchs. And I would say that when I look at the Ukraine or Czech Republic, when you have rich people owning media quite often, it used to be like this in Hungary too, I think. I'm not sure about Slovakia, but you can tell us that this foreign capital is very often immune to the pressure, especially if it's, of course, we don't have Russian capital, right? I mean, it's German or French or international funds. They are business oriented, but at the same time, they don't bow to the pressure of the government. Whereas the biggest private TV with the best coverage in the countryside, so in theory in the areas where low injustice voters live and so on, because it is a Polish owner, he's got other business like energy business, which is very prone to the regulation. So he's been pushed into becoming a kind of soft pro-law and pro-government propaganda in the last 2 years. You can see, basically you can see regulation coming. He closed the kind of left-leaning small TV, and he pushed the mainstream TV into very kind of soft propaganda, pro-government propaganda. So this ownership is extremely important, and the problem is that governments know this, and they want to introduce the laws like in the Western Europe, which is, for example, anti-concentration laws. But in practice, if you introduce this today, that would mean that the national capital could buy the private media, and because we don't have that much private capital in Poland, that could have to be, of course, the nationalization of the media. I hope that because of the United States and because of the EU, it will be close to impossible. So sometimes too much national capital could actually prove to be counterproductive in terms of the media freedom, at least in Polish case.
If you allow me, I would have a very short question to Peter about the Hungarian situation, because CASMA stands for Central European Press and Media Fund. And with Tanya, we already discussed yesterday that actually the Orbán government, or at least oligarchs, they have some kind of, they bought media outlets. So do you think CASMA stands for Central European because maybe these pro-government media, or is there going to be some kind of attempt to broaden their scope and maybe buy media outlets, not just in Hungary, but in the region as well?
Very good question. I see lots attempts for that in Central Eastern Europe, more in the Western Balkans, and especially in non-EU member states, in Serbia, in Macedonia. Okay, there were some in Croatia as well, but I think it mostly targets the Western Balkans. This is where the Hungarian soft power, I think, mostly directed to. I don't know that much about Central European expansion. There is this one V4 news agency that originally aimed to target the countries of the region with some kind of news, but more and more I see that the only function of this news agency is to tell practically the same that usually the Hungarian media does, but it can be referred to as a foreign news agency, and it gives it more credibility because most of the voters simply doesn't know what it is. So, but they come up with stories that have domestic political relevance in Hungary, and not so much, I think, any message to other Central Eastern European countries.
Thank you. If you don't mind, I would continue with the big picture. We already mentioned the ownership, and in Tanya's presentation, that was also actually the economic freedom are very important indicators of the freedom of the press. And actually now, after the gonzo journalism, subjective journalism, journalism, opinions became more important. So because of the relevance of ownership, and Gabor already mentioned that actually the people who lived before the democratic transition, they used to the fact that there's no facts, that there's fake news in Hungary and in the former communist regimes in the V4 countries. So at that time, people thought that the media freedom means that you can write, you can say what you want. Now you can write, you can say what you want, but maybe no one's going to listen. No one's going to watch. So shouldn't we reconsider the meaning, the content, or the conditions of media freedom? Check, maybe we can continue the same order.
When you say we should reconsider the media freedom, what do you mean?
What are the conditions to have a free press? Because after the transition, we thought that maybe we have a free press if you can write down what you want, but shouldn't we reconsider it?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, when it's a very general question. It's like of course, the free speech comes with responsibility, and the problem is that with media, if you write the same thing on Facebook and you write it in your newspaper, if you write it in your newspaper, you could go to jail. If you write it on Facebook, well, maybe they will delete your post, and that's all. So if you say something abusive on the public TV, they can shut down the program, or even private TV, because there is a lot of regulation. The internet is not regulated at all in terms of responsibility for what you say. And there is anonymity as well possible, right? So that's why you can have Russian trolls or pro-government trolls. So this is not, and the kind of real media struggle to be like the social media, but they can't for obvious reasons, right? They can't be so radical ever. They can't. They try to be. No, I see the problem is that I don't see that much a problem if the kind of traditional media could preserve this kind of struggle for truth and objectivity. But honestly, it seems that almost no one is expecting them to tell us the facts that we don't like, It is like you almost want to hear what is like really confirming your prejudice at the beginning. And I don't say it's not only about the pro-Orban or pro-Kaczynski people. It's the same with us. It's like it's very difficult if you are in the public sphere, if you're on Twitter, followed by, let's say, pro-opposition people, like in my case, and you write something that is criticizing the opposition. Wow, they said that you are actually supporting the government. You are the traitor. It's very hard not to bow to such pressure, especially if you depend on these people, right? Because if you are a big newspaper, you've got advertising, you are independent of the direct responses to your readers. At least for some time, you could write the truths that some of the readers don't like. But this connection is becoming more and more direct. More and more journalists are just influencers, and the same for politicians. It's like sometimes it's hard to say who is a influencer, like a commentator, political commentator, who is a politician. Because politicians, most of them, they have no power at all. They can go on a TV, they can speak, they can say something radical, they can say something that would be circulating for 24 hours. So there is a tendency to be more and more radical because it means visibility. It's very rarely connected closely to any truth at all. So I don't believe that the regulation would be great if it could solve any problems, but it rarely does. I believe we have a structural problem. We can't really we can't really regulate and tell Facebook what to do. I believe that after what we've seen the last, well, let's say 8 to 10 years, we should perhaps think more of the internet media, like social media, like YouTube especially. For example, we don't talk about radicalization of YouTube, but YouTube really, you can see that if you're following some, let's say you are interested in anti-immigrant issues, right? So you read about migration, then you can read something about the hard right, maybe people like, Brexit party and so on. And then you kind of getting into more and more kind of harder stuff. Then you can see perhaps ultra-right. Then you can see swastikas and Hitler, because you always are pushed a little bit. You always get something harder and more radical. And YouTube is the main source of information for people who are like under 25. And they don't really watch TV at all. And I think the problem is that we can't really, dictate United States what to do with the social media and the YouTube. But I believe we should think of them more as we think of the traditional media, with the responsibility. I really strongly believe that with the influence comes responsibility. And I think it's been almost invisible in our debates about the influence. We talk about taking down the trolls and taking down the Russian propaganda, but it's really just a small problem. It is not the fake news that is a problem. The real news are the problem. It is the real news that elected Donald Trump. It is the real news that made Brexit happen. It is the real news that made Orban, scare Hungarians into like 60% of support. It is the real news that made the anti-liberal and authoritarian government happen in Poland. And also it's because of the liberal news which followed the narratives of the far right. And we have to solve this problem, not just take down a couple of websites.
Viera, what do you think? What are the conditions of independent journalism?
In Slovakia or in general? In Slovakia, okay, there are again two groups. I loving to have my groups. So the first group is like really independent journalists. They are becoming the owner of the news media houses. For example, Deník N, if you know them, it's a popular online media house that is right now owning also in Czech Republic, Deník N CZ, and it's becoming more and more stronger. It is the one media that is becoming like or creating new narratives towards fighting fake news, combating fake news, and also the most popular Aktuality SK, where Kuciak was written in the past. It is owned by German holdership. So still the impact of the foreign owners in Slovakia is really connected towards their openness, protecting of the liberal society, protecting of our democracy. But we had it during the Mečiar regimes. TV Markiza was the first television who came up with this narrative of fighting liberal democracy against Vladimir Mečiar. So we have it rooted in the society that only the foreign owners could somebody build the trust towards civil society in Slovakia. But if we are speaking about fake news, about the ethic of the journalists, it's becoming harder for me to divide between public opinion makers on the Facebook and journalists that are commenting under the news. And this is really hard because what for me is the most negative sign of Facebook or online media behavior is that those people normalize the radical behavior. It was becoming more and more mainstream in Slovak journalistic ethic. Also, the journalists are becoming more extremist in their stereotypes, in their behavior, how they are written against the politicians, how they are written against European Union, Russia, NATO. And this, I think, this is becoming the most crucial problem, that we're losing the ethic to be a journalist, also in Slovakia and also abroad. So I think the first what we should do, and this is a catchy slogan, education. This is the way how we should do it, because if I may just brief present you the data of our younger generation in Slovakia, 80% of them are reading only blogs and comments under the fake news on the internet. Only 16% of them are fact-checking their news. 16% of the younger generation. And now fascists are becoming the most popular political party in our group of the youngest, under the 30 years old. So this is becoming the new problem, that our younger generation is uncritical, they read everything on the internet, and they don't have historical memory to somehow to read under the context.
Thank you. Roman, how could you maintain media freedom in the Czech Republic?
I will answer it a little bit other way. Yeah. As I mentioned before, so our information or media space has changed since 2014 when we saw these new so-called alternative websites publishing the stories about chemtrails and about how Ukrainian fascists are eating children and so on. Yeah? And of course, these fake messages you cannot see in mainstream media. Yeah? And what does it mean? It means these alternative informations are hidden, censored, and so on. Yeah? And from this perspective, a lot of people were speaking that our mainstream medias are liars and censored and so on. Yeah? And they were calling for free, independent, and objective media. Yeah? So we want free media, we want independent media, but try to publish something these people don't agree. Yeah? So it means you are not free and objective. So if you don't publish these stories about chemtrails, it means you are not free and objective. Yeah, so it's the reality. So it's for these people is what does it mean truth? It means the truth is something with I agree with. Yeah, so it's a big problem that a lot of people, so they are not calling to get free and good quality information, independent media. So they are only accepting the information they agree with. Yeah, and also, when I spoke with my friends working in Czech Public TV or Czech Public Radio, this media have got many emails publish these hidden informations about HARP, which is like a climatical weapon built in Alaska or somewhere. Yeah, publish this about chemtrails, publish this. Yeah, and if you don't publish it, it means you are like a puppet of CIA and something like that. Yeah. Or publish this story about how Ukrainians are baking children from Donbass in the oven and so on. Yeah? So it is like this wave of disinformation and propaganda. So it's a problem that a lot of people, they just want to believe in it, and if they don't see it in like mainstream media, it means that we don't have free and independent media.
Peter?
I think Roman raised a very important point. I think we usually tend, and practically all of us, of course to different degree, but tend to rather agree or tend to think that what we believe in is true and agree with and assume that we are always right. And we are, of course, less fact-checking ourselves as well, the positions that are closer to us than the ones that are more distant. So I think no one is really, how to say, no one is free of biases. And of course, it's not even a, I mean, we shouldn't even set it as an ideal goal that there will never be any kind of misinformation, biased information, so on, because this is how we process the information. But wish we would have the same problem in Hungary that you just mentioned, that good journalists want to do their good work in the public media and just receiving mails from chemtrail believers on that publish this and that, and of course they don't do. I had the chance, I was invited in both the Czech and Slovakian public media, and I can tell that the quality between them and what we can see in Hungary is really, it's two different universes. And even if, of course, the whole concept of public media is in a lot of sense problematic, but still I think it matters that if the state in that respect could, let's say, set some kind of rather good or not bad example. Just one reaction to Leszek's point. I think that, sometimes real news is a problem, but fake news is increasingly a problem that can really decide elections. So there were investigations in the United States and in 2016 that showed that the top fake news pieces took over in engagement and share and popularity. The Facebook from the real news. So it's simply fake news trumped real news in the Facebook scene. And in Hungary as well, in 2018, the whole campaign of the government was a totally fake story, that George Soros wants to bring a lot of refugees to Europe and to Hungary, destroy nation state. Everyone is their puppet, and it's a huge, big empire that destroys everything. The amount of money that George Soros spent a year here in Hungary is about the 10th of what the government spent in a year on the campaigns against George Soros, and still it worked perfectly. So both can be problem.
I would like to add, so and also what we listen in our society, so there are calls that this media should be balanced. It means you have one opinion for this topic and against this, and so it means like if you speak about terrorist attacks on World Trade Center, so you have to have one like a serious journalist, analyst, or whatever, and on the other side you have to have some person working with conspiracy theories and something like that, and there were such a nice example of the result of this attempt to balance this debate. So it was on Czech Public Radio a debate between a professor of astronomy from Czech Academy of Sciences and supporter of, so he was debating with the supporter of theory of flat Earth, and maybe you saw a few days public radio, and so few days ago there was a man from United States. He was also supporter for this theory flat Earth, and he like
launched himself in the
and
rocket.
so it was a very interesting debate. So you could observe a professor of astronomy explaining some, I don't know, some physics, and against him was a guy saying that there are many proofs on YouTube, many videos on YouTube proving that Earth is flat. So it is also like, I think this is not. We are saying like a 5 minutes Jews and 5 minutes Hitler. So we have this proverb. So I think it is also bad way, and you cannot reach like a good and quality media. But a lot of people are calling for this balancing.
But is it typical? Is it typical in the Czech public media, or it's just rather an extraordinary case?
It is. I have to say that it is not typical, and thanks God it is not typical, because it was really crazy. So.
I just jumped to Peter because I completely agree with you about the media landscape comparison Slovakia, Czech Republic, and Hungary. But again, I will repeat myself and will be really naive. After the death, everything changed. Also, the society step forward for the journalists, and they were becoming the new supporters of the media landscape, like, let's say, independent one. And also the civil society changed the narrative. They will be becoming the new, like, let's say, watchdogs who were monitoring the fact checks on the internet. And right now, I think we have 10 initiatives who are monitoring fake news on the internet. They were becoming the most influential actors before the parliamentary election. So yeah, that changed everything in a positive way, but yeah, we will see what happens after the election if we were able to hold this narrative.
And isn't the fact-checking scene is also highly politicized? I mean that finally everyone has their own fact-checkers.
6 of these 10 initiatives are funded by NGOs and think tanks in Slovakia, and from German Stiftungen. So they are still be managed independently. 4 of them are funded with progressive, and also one is funding by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but this ministry is still an independent ministry to comparison to the Ministry of Interior. So still we try to manage it to get it more independent. Yeah.
So there's going to be elections on this Sunday in Slovakia, and well, my next question is about actually how to, if someone can influence elections really with fake news. If I would have a lot of money, which I don't, and I would, is it possible just with money to buy media outlets or give money for journalists or for internet trolls to influence the election in the V4 countries? Maybe we can start with Vieira because you're going to have the election on this Sunday.
For example, if you know Kotleba political party, the fascist political party that is right now a mainstream political party in our government, they have the cheapest campaign actually right now, the cheapest one, but they are the most successful actors at the online sphere because they have so many volunteers who spread the fake news and disinformation. So they don't even need to have money to change the discourse in the online sphere.
Because they have to pay for the trolls.
It's not paying trolls. Come on, there are really volunteers that believing that Kotleba will be the next change towards Slovak political future. So they're managing it to build an online volunteering community to promote themselves towards other actors and individuals. And they also change, I think, the way of branding the information. They becoming the new force who really sophisticated, create a narrative of the agent from outside who will be paying by Soros, by the US agencies, who will be these agents like me. I'm the one for them actually right now. We are the most popular foreign agents paid by Soros during the campaigning right now. And they managed to, I think, spread the narrative of the stereotype that liberals, LGBT community, Jews, maybe pro-European thinkers, and also maybe some academics are paid by Soros to destroy the traditional Slovak society. And family also. And this narrative was, I think, the main tool how he was able, Kotleba, to form this bunch of volunteers who are proactive on the online sphere. And even he has the cheapest campaign in the era of Slovak campaigning.
Would it be possible to have a serious impact on the outcome of a politician by promoting fake news and spreading fake news?
Right. So when I said that this is the real news that are the problem, I didn't mean that I think that fake news are not a problem at all. I just see a gray zone between complete invention of facts by anonymous websites, and there's one thing, and we should not, of course, ignore it, but I think it has a limited impact, at least in the long term. But there is like a gray zone between facts that could be partly true, but they are magnified and put out of the context and used by the powerful actors like politicians or other influencers, like media people or simply the personalities, media personalities. Like I can give you an example of one obvious. There is like a proof you can win the campaign with, maybe not. Yeah, well, I would call it disinformation. I wouldn't call it fake news. Disinformation. Like 2015 campaign in Poland was to a large extent won by Law and Justice because they started just during the campaign to change the attitudes of people towards the immigrants. Because at the 2015 you had 21% of Poles who said that we should not accept the refugees from the countries where is the war. About 50% were skeptical towards accepting the refugees from the EU countries. I mean, those who already are in the EU. But after the 7 months of the campaign, I mean, it was in May 2015, we had like presidential elections, then we had parliamentary elections in the fall. And until the end of the year, the attitudes has been changed, but about 8 to 9 million people altogether. So in the end of the year, about 60% of Poles, so out of 21, around 60% of Poles said we should not accept refugees from the war zones, from Syria and other countries where is currently war. It was one of the biggest operations you could imagine. And I wouldn't say that it was financed by Russia or it was orchestrated by spreading the fake news. It was basically the operation of the politicians who, for example, Jarosław Kaczynski, who is the, behind the scenes, the real ruler of Poland, he said something like, the refugees carry parasites, which could be dangerous for people in this part of the world. Therefore, we should really check their health before we think of accepting them, and we should keep them in camps. And it's like, perhaps some of these people were ill. Maybe there was an information that they carried, I don't know, malaria or whatever. Or if they spent like years in the camps, refugee camps, of course they could be ill. But if you use this kind of information, and it's almost like the Goebbels propaganda, Another direct fake news was that, for example, 1,800 Swedes are looking for the refuge in Poland. There was like one Swede who was applying for being a refugee in Poland, and he was rejected. And it was a direct fake news, proving that in Sweden they have such a problem with the migration that they actually are looking for the asylum in Poland. There was like another. It's a question for the specialists. Maybe for Peter, is it a fake news? So, an argument is that Finland accepted 800 Somali people in the past. Now they have 18,000. So it is like, because they were joining the families, maybe it was 100 and they made 18,000. So you have to count 100, magnify any number of refugees by 180. So if Poland was forced to accept 6,000 because of the EU regulation, well, that would make them like 1.2 million of people. And we can't have 1.2 million refugees, But no one ever said we should have 1.2 million. And so that's a question. And this is the official stance of some important politicians. Another argument of this anti-refugee campaign. We should protect our people from, I would quote as now his deputy prime minister of Polish government, Jarosław Gowin. He was said to be a moderate conservative. So he said the ISIS is actually blowing up the babies we would never accept blowing up babies in this country. No, we would defend Poland against blowing up the babies. Terrorists would never do this in here. And you could say, okay, perhaps ISIS did it, but what does it have anything to do with Poland or the refugee issue? And what is interesting is that you could expect that this kind of things would happen directly after some terrorist attack, right? The Charlie Hebdo attack. No, it didn't. Actually, they went quiet. They didn't say nothing about it. But when there was the Germany attack in Berlin, it was during the campaign. It served well their purpose. So what I want to say with this short, well, perhaps I'm boring you a little bit with something which happened 5 years ago. What is so important that you have actors who have the audience, who can influence the audience, and they can interpret the facts. And the politicians are the people who can create or counter the narratives. And they were extremely, extremely agile in doing this because they knew what are the values of the Polish society, so protecting the families, for example, and the security. So they took some imagined, most of it was imagined fear, and they applied it to these values. And this is extremely efficient. The problem is that the other, let's say, side can't really do the politics of fear well, or politics of creating the powerful narratives, which would apply to values that people respect. But I think it could be done. I believe it could be done.
May I just jump in? Yes, it was the same situation 5 years ago in Slovakia before the parliamentary election. Robert Fico, a mainstream politician who was becoming the main leader of the anti-immigration thesis about the millions and millions Muslims who will rape our women, the Catholic women. So, and he opened the Pandora's box, a mainstream politician, and after 2016, fascists entered to the parliament. Only who gains the support from this fear was the fascists, not Robert Fico and Smeres, because they were losing preferences, and the Kotleba was rising.
Roman, these different Russian fake news sites, do these have any real impact on Czech politics, or it just something which actually lunatics are reading?
Yeah. So there was a poll, and there was said that 25% of Czechs is trusting more to these so-called alternative websites than to traditional media. But if we speak about like impacting elections and their results, so there are different types of elections, and if we see parliamentary elections, so there is no chance in the Czech Republic to build like one-party government. So it is about like creating coalition, and what we see in the parliament. So there is a as I mentioned, different types of these fake news about chemtrails, and so these narratives are supporting agenda of the Communist Party, and also like a quite new party, Freedom and Direct Democracy. So it's analog of Alternative für Deutschland and this Marine Le Pen, Matteo Salvini, and so on. And and this party is chaired by the Tomio Okamura. So it's a typical Czech name, Tomio Okamura, and now he's like a leader of Czech nationalists. And he's like against migration and multiculturalism. He's the biggest fighter against multiculturalism. His mother is Czech and his father is Japanese, and he was born in Tokyo. And so, but their real power is about like this Okamura's party is oscillating between 5 and 10%. So you have not such a big chance to be a prime minister or something like that. But there is a different type of elections. It was presidential elections in 2018 between Miloš Zeman and Jiří Drahoš. And Jiří Drahoš, he was a professor, chairman of Academy of Sciences, and he was not well known to the public. And it means you can create a story you want about him, because public, they don't know, they know nothing about him, yeah. And what we saw in this campaign, yeah. So all these fake news websites or social networks campaign operated from Dubai by Czech professional working in marketing and internet and PR. So they were supporting Miloš Zeman because Miloš Zeman is a patriot and he's fighting against Islam and migrants, and he likes Vladimir Putin, and he's for these traditional values. And Mr. Drahoš, he wants all migrants, yeah, from Africa. So he's paid by Soros and whatever you can imagine, yeah. And behind this campaign there were, of course, Russian and Chinese money, especially there are officially Czech companies, but with interest with Russia and China, yeah. So there is an airline company, travel service, so they finance campaign of Miloš Zeman, and travel service is owned, I don't remember the exact share, yeah, but they are owned from Chinese company, yeah, and so on. And you could see all the country surrounded by advertisement, these billboards in the highways or in the cities: stop migrants, stop Drahoš, vote for Zeman. Yeah, so you could see it everywhere. You could see on the internet, social networks, you can see also the same stories that Drahoš is for all Africa in the Czech Republic, and we will be replaced by Muslims and Africans. This is again agenda of Drahoš, and only Zeman can save us. Yeah, and also these chain emails targeting these older people. So this the audience was flooded by this, and there were also fake quotations of Drahoš. Yeah, it's enough if you have some picture of Drahoš and you in paint you draw a bubble and with fake quotation, and people are sharing it because it's true. It looks like a real quotation because there is a bubble and so on. Yeah. And the results were 51% plus something against 48 to Drahoš. Yeah, and it's different than parliamentary election because you need to create coalition. But this is like one against one. Yeah, and I think there could be the impact of this fake news and manipulation can change the final results because you can move few percents from here to other candidate.
Peter, you've made a research at Political Capital, I think, on the impact of fake news in the V4 countries, right? But we all see the same patterns, like Soros, migration, accusing people. What was the outcome of your research? Could you tell us about
this
it?
research? We've done quite a lot of research projects in Central Eastern Europe from different perspectives related to disinformation. Mostly we were focusing on disinformation from Russia or favoring Russia. And yeah, I could just agree with what has been already said, that yes, I think there is how to say a bigger organic demand probably in Slavic countries and in Czech Republic and most notably Slovakia for pro-Russian narratives because of the history, because of the similarities in the culture and pan-Slavism and so on. But at the same time, we did not see it anywhere else. What we could see in Hungary, that the major source of pro-Russian disinformation is again the mainstream media and the public media and the state-owned media. So Russia Today wanted to open a channel here in Hungary. Sergei Lavrov, Russian foreign minister, told it in 2016 in a public speech. He mentioned the countries where Russia Today will open new offices. Hungary was among them. They even found a journalist in Hungary who could have been the chief editor, Laszlo Just. There was a contract undersigned, but then the Russians abandoned the idea. Why? I think because they felt there is no need to. Why open Russia today if the Hungarian public television spreads, for example, the conspiracy narratives about Ukraine, about the MH17 flight? I mean, this Russian disinformation narratives found their royal route to the Hungarian public through so-called public analysts who just repeated the Kremlin communique, but they are very popular in the public media. So I think there is a difference in that respect. If we take a look at the public opinion, Slovakia seems to be probably the most vulnerable to the pro-Russian, anti-NATO narratives. But in Hungary, we could also see that this very concentrated effort to change the image of Russia had some impact, despite the history that really not plays in the hands of Russia when it comes to bilateral relations and image, and despite the lack of cultural and language corrections.
Thank you, Raj. Now I'd like to open the floor for the questions from the audience. We could take a couple of questions, I think, and then the panelists can answer these. So please raise your hand if you... We have one question here. Just a minute, and just a second, and then you're going to get the mic.
Sorry if this is working. Yeah. Sorry if this comes over as a naive question, but it's kind of fundamental, I guess. I remember when I was at school in the UK so many years ago, in our English lessons, our master would kind of try to help us to analyze the news and look for bias. Now, in 1960s, Hungary, Czech, Poland, etc., I don't think you would have had that in your Slovak lessons or your Polish lessons. My question simply is, partly with you were talking about education, do you have that in your schools, in your secondary schools? Do the teachers ask the students to look at the news and try to find bias?
In Hungary, there was a media literacy class in secondary education. It has been just taken out practically from the curriculum. So it seems that no need for that. Everyone is conscious enough, it seems.
Should we collect some more questions? Magyarul is fel lehet tenni a kérdéseket, van nálunk fordítógép, úgyhogy...
Hello, I would like to address a question and more of a remark as well. It's pertaining Roman's affirmation that everyone wants to believe the truth that they know is true. And the way I feel that one of the major problems is that social media has created bubbles for all of its users. And I'm talking about all of social media. And while, let's say, 40 years ago, you were in your bubble because you were buying the same paper all the time, when you went to the kiosk, you had 50 types of papers, let's say, and you could buy any of them. But now, with social media, the kiosk is filled with 50 types of papers that are the same paper, basically. And it keeps you in your own little bubble that always confirms your own expectations. And you see this if you just go on someone else's account who is, let's say, on the right side while you're on the left. And I tried it, and it kind of blew my mind. It's like, oh my God, it's the same event, but it's totally different. The shift in perspective is different. Now, the issue is that this type of bubbles is very helpful from an economical standpoint, from a political standpoint. It is able to generate a lot of income. But for the end user, it does not bring him closer to an objective view of reality, if we could call it that. So would not that be the question how to create more of a mix of different points of view for the end user? Because I myself or you or your grandmother, you're just scrolling Facebook, and we're not fact-checking titles. We're just reading, oh, Soros is doing this and Soros is doing that. Oh, Russia, oh, the Russian trolls did this and the Russian trolls did that. And I hate the Russian trolls because I see them all the time, while you hate Soros because you see him all the time. So it's the same problem, but we're in different camps. But the big problem is that you're being pushed towards a small group of your peers that all think the same thing, and it's good. It's good, let's say, for a company to have this kind of groups. So, what could we do to address this issue?
So, how to come out from the bubble? There's a third question there.
Thank you. I myself find this debate very interesting and very relevant. Let me add the comment. It might be of some use to you. My trade is telecom regulation, and I participated in a telecom conference in Geneva, maybe almost 30 years ago. 30 years ago. There came a guy, a big burly man from Idaho or Nevada or wherever, by the name of John Perry Barlow, who turned out to be the president of Electronic Foundation, Frontier Foundation, which was the organization which started to promote the idea of a free internet, free for all, which would be laid down as the basis for democracy all over the place, and whereby everyone will have the right to say whatever he wants, and this will lead to the best of words, direct democracy and good public policy. Now, if you look back, we should say this was a utopia, and now what you are talking about is a kind of dystopia. European Union and the United States, Japan, all over the place, regulators, agencies, governments are trying to wrestle with the big issue of how to regulate the internet, how to protect privacy, how to provide reasonable structures to contain political debate, how to squeeze fake news, etc. So I think it's never too late to learn from history. All I'm trying to make is that if you are trying to forecast future developments, you should be more careful than we were at the time, back in the early 90s, when we had high hopes attached to the bonanza of internet. Thank you.
Thank you. It was not so long ago when Facebook was seen as a tool for democracy during the Arab Spring. So we have three questions here. Media literacy, if it's teached in your country, how to get out of the Facebook bubble, and what about the regulation? And if we can still be optimistic about Facebook and social media as a tool, as a tool of empowerment of citizens, which is, I think, so. Peter, please, maybe.
Yeah, thank you very much, and I apologize. I have to leave after this response. My students are waiting for me, so I have to. I'm not sure they are waiting, but I have to deliver a lecture at least, so I have to be there. But I think your questions are extremely relevant, and I'm quite grateful that you raised that. I think that we should be more conscious about our own biases and check our biases as well, because yes, I think that there is such thing as truth and there is such thing as misinformation, and sometimes it's hard to judge, sometimes it's easier, but all of our biases makes us receptive to a certain extent to some kind of misinformation, and I think that bubbles have their merits, in the sense that, first of all, you feel better in a bubble. So it's like not it's not just by accident that bubbles form, because this is, I mean, similar attitudes attract similar attitudes. And also, I mean, if you are specialized in a topic, I think a bubble can help you to go even further. But at the same time, I do think that we should be careful about easily judging something as fake news, because a lot of things that we are telling, it's for others, this is the fake news. I had the honor of participating on a debate with the spokesman of the government, Zoltán Kovács, and his first sentence was that, I'm happy that you're sitting here next to me because you are the major source of misinformation. So which was quite honoring. I mean, I never think about that I'm so relevant, that I'm the major source of disinformation. But he told that, and of course, I mean, it's cynical, it's a political game. But on the other hand, of course, I think they believe it about 80%, that the things that we guys are telling are bad. And George Soros is conspiring against the world, and you can build up a conspiracy theory just as a political tool, like it happened in Hungary with the George Soros story with American consultants, and finally you start to believe your own story that you built up to fool the voters. And I think more and more this is what's happening in Hungary. But at the same time, we can see that on the left liberal side, I think there are more and more misinformation as well, and biased information. And I think as Trump did a lot of bad things with the liberal media in the United States, I think Orbán made a lot of bad things with the left-wing and liberal media in Hungary as well. Because in an extremely polarized environment, I think it's you're just fueling the hyper-partisan narratives.
Thank you, Roman, please.
So I will briefly go through all three questions. The first question about media literacy about in the Czech Republic. So from my point of view, it's underestimated. So it's the role of the state or Ministry of Education. So it is like a substitute by NGOs. So there are like projects One World at schools. And they are like providing for schools education materials about media literacy, organizing workshops and things like that. So there is a still debate how to improve media literacy and to put this issue into school curricula. But it is very slow, long process, because not only about ministry but about something like conservative thinking in schools. So I think it's underestimated. About the second question about social bubbles, thank you for this question, because I see it also as a problem. And you mentioned the conflict right against left thinking, or political attitude. I think because of these social networks and social bubbles, we can see that these two groups are shifting more and more to the different like ends of axis. And it is also, I think, it is replaced, because we see what we see in our society is polarized society, and this is like inner conflict, not between like right and left. It is between people younger living in cities with better jobs, better social and economic conditions, against people with like lower education living in rural areas with bad conditions and so on. And what I see, to say it very, very briefly, so I think there is a conflict between the people who see their future as a future and between the people who see their future as a return to the past. So it is like my view on the Czech situation. And what is a problem about these social bubbles? So it is not only about internet, where our people are often anonymous, they are more brave, they are more like fighting each other, because it is easy to fight with someone when you are safely at home. But what is a problem, it is also that we see a lot of families they don't speak with each other because, you know, so you have like a grandfather and grandson, and they cannot speak because grandfather is like sympathizing with Miloš Zeman, and the grandson is against Miloš Zeman, yeah, and they cannot speak with each other, so it is going also offline. And I think there is a solution, and it can be like a solution from the government or whatever. Yeah, I think you know, so there is a proverb that what we can do, we are only like a small water drop in the sea. But what is the sea? It's like millions and millions of these small pieces. And for example, my mother is also on pension. She is staying at home. She is not traveling, and so on. Yeah, and she's vulnerable because she is also online, and she is getting these fake news emails. Yeah, she is like exploring for news on the internet, googling for some tips for some health issues and things like that. Yeah, and during this process, she is seeing this fake news and so on. And I'm just speaking with her, yeah, because she's getting like a news that there is apocalypse in Germany. Germans cannot leave their houses, yeah. And 2 weeks ago, I was in Berlin. So I'm speaking with her what I saw in Berlin and what was the situation in Berlin. Yeah, so I think this is the solution. And about the third comment or questions about between chaos and how to say like more strict rules. Yeah, I think we should start with like following the law. Yeah, so it is necessary to follow the law, and what we can saw here in the Czech Republic. So a lot of people on the internet, they become crazy. Yeah, and what we saw, there was a school in a small town Teplice, which is positive, popular for people originally from Middle East, but they are from Kuwait and countries like that, and they like Teplice, and they have children at schools, and there is absolutely no problem with them. Yeah, so there are more rich than ordinary Czechs and so on. And Teplice, so a lot of people in Teplice, they have their jobs because there are people from Kuwait. Yeah, and there is one school, and there was a picture of class, and it was published on a fake news website. Look, it is our future, and these 6-year-old children were guilty that they don't have like a Czech color of skin, and they were threatened by sending them to gas chambers. We should use grenades or them, and they will be our future mass killers. Yeah, and I think it is not like an opinion, alternative opinion, and I think we should follow the law because it's not normal to speak publicly things like that, yeah. And also it's a security issue that there was a 71-year-old man from Czech Republic, Central Bohemian region, and he also became crazy that he attacked two trains in 2017, trains with passengers. Yeah, he cut trees on the railway track, and the trains almost derailed, and it was passenger trains, and at this place he left some papers. It was done by Islamic State, yeah. And when he was arrested by police, now he is in the prison for 4 years, and he has to go through some psychiatric processes. The police found in her computer a lot of content of like these fake news about that to his small town millions of migrants are heading and things like that. Yeah, so I think we should follow the law about like spreading hoaxes or alert messages about this hate speech and things like that. Yeah, because I think it is not to threaten small children. It is not normal. So this is my answer.
Thank you, Roman. Vera, please, maybe you can also make some final conclusions or closing remarks, because I don't think we have time for further questions, please.
really, I will be really short about the fact-checking and the media literacy in Slovakia. The same situation as in Czech. A lot of civil society actors are helping in replacing state organization towards education. But on the other hand, there are various types of programs paid by state. I'm the member of just one. It's called the School of Without Hate. But still, they use NGOs as the analysts to be a part, active part under the state financing programs, education programs. So still, civil society is stronger, more stronger than the state in the education. About the bubbles, just one thing, only interaction with the bubbles. We have a social initiative that is becoming more and more popular. The people are in favor to comment under these social bubbles with their own narratives. And if you have a discussion under a fake news story, so the people are becoming more and more maybe open towards other narratives or other ideas. So this is my solution, just to comment under the news, nothing else.
Right, so I'm not really aware of such programs today in Poland, not with regards to the media directly. You know, critical thinking, I believe it's still there, but it's not necessarily, you know, talking about internet, about news, about current issues. The problem with Polish school is very rooted in the past, so the history lessons really ends around the 1945. And I think it explains a lot. As for the bubbles, right? I think I agree with what's been said. The problem is with that such a segregation of opinion is possible today. It was impossible even like 20, 30 years ago. And it's also with regard to the politics, it's also the problem. So you had segregated parties and you had segregated newspapers. So before, people of different opinion could read the same newspaper or watch the same TV program or even vote for the same party for very different reasons. Now you can have your niche marketing. You can really, it's not that just Cambridge Analytica. You can just really reach audiences that are they're very coherent. They don't overlap. If you don't overlap, at least you feel you don't overlap, because we all, of course we overlap, but we are divided by those who think that they want to call divisions, right? And because by division, divide et impera, right? Divide and rule. You have to create divisions to actually rule opinion and rule people. So of course you have a lot in common with your neighbor who votes for Orban, but it's not really important in this context. Like the question is whether you can find another division, because I don't believe in this kind of miraculous agreements of everyone with everyone. Yeah, because unity, you know, we all lived in the countries where we had total unity, right, of opinion. It wasn't that good, right? But we can think about different divisions, maybe more healthy, maybe less fake, maybe less, maybe more relevant. Like, for example, you know, those people who think that we should save the planet, or those who think that the future of our children is important, right? I think even the most radical nationalists would agree that, okay, the future of our children is important. So maybe we should try to keep the country for them in the next 80 years, right? And we start a different discussion. As for the regulation and kind of final remarks, the model for the internet, well, it's extremely complicated the way that internet works. I mean, I'm not a specialist. I think it's very interesting to learn how it is really regulated, because it's not state regulation, it's not private regulation. It's kind of a mixture of very different. Whoa, we are moving. Okay, I think it's a sign I have to end. The model of the advertising of the internet, I think the advertising model, the dominant model, I think this is the real core of this, well, distraction of the public sphere, because the whole social media models and most of the other models, not all of them, are really fighting for our attention, and our attention is very precious. You know, we shouldn't like sell it for nothing, and so they want to keep us as long as possible glued to our little screens. And there are different models. There are models based on the subscriptions, for example, or, well, kind of NGO-funded models that could be really for free, community models. There are different models which could be less less destructive for our behavior online. And so the final thought that I just thought about today, discussing this with you, is that the problem is that we think of the communication very often as in terms of this kind of enlightenment, looking for truth, finding consensus, understanding each other. And it's a beautiful concept. And these are the concepts that made me interested, in the public sphere and writing and everything. The problem with this ideal concept is that we are really now in the world of the almost not total but info war. That communication is a tool of fighting and winning the war. And this war is happening all the time. Most of the time, this is a civil war within our society. And we are the soldiers because we are online, most of us. We produce information. We are not just reading, even if we're just reading newspapers and talking about it during the dinners or with friends, we're also soldiers fighting these wars. But before, the tools of war it was very much like a duel. You had one publicist against the other, and you had recipients. Nowadays, it's like almost a total war because you can directly influence the minds of people who are reading the social media or normal media in a way that was impossible before. And to win the war, as you know, you can basically use any resources available. And this is how you win wars. And there's one side which understands it and is determined to use everything to win this war. And there is the other side who either doesn't understand or doesn't want to participate. Because honestly, which of us wants to be the part of the war, even if you win? Even if you win, you lose a lot. And this is the problem, that is it possible to either return to this ideal, which never was, we should not romanticize the media of the 19th century, for example. The early newspapers were even worse than whatever you can read today online, or almost as bad. And there was the fake news and propaganda and everything. But is it liberal democracy possible with this total war in communication? And can we somehow think about the peace, or at least the truce, or at least some Geneva agreements that we wouldn't use certain techniques to actually win with our opponents, because the conflict is bad for everyone, even for those who win. It's destructive. And this is the question I don't have the direct answer to, because that would require us, as those who participate, to try to end it. And one way is actually to think whether being online, and it also applies to me because I'm very active online and using it for our purposes, for our campaigns and so on back in Poland, whether this is the better version of myself. Is it the version of myself that actually I want to present to the people? Whether when I'm mocking some arguments of the right-wing, populists, whether by mocking them, I'm not actually applying to the logic which in the end serves these kind of people who are the most cynical. Because if you have no rules, the strongest win. And in this case, the strongest is the most determined and the most ruthless. So liberals or people of the goodwill, they need rules to protect them, right? Some rules, because otherwise that will be those who win in the world without rules. So we could have some influence, I believe. It will be difficult. It could be uphill struggle, but in the end, if we all decide that we want peace instead of communication war, I hope we could make the peace win. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leszek. Even if now there's an ongoing war of information and communication, I think the conferences of the Republican Institute is an island of peace, because now we can have here always about peace, and we can have a rational debate, and we can also have unbiased research data. Unfortunately, we are out of time. There's no time for further questions. I'd like to thank for our panelists, Roman, Vieira, and Leszek. Thank you again for accepting our invitation. Most egy kis szünetet tartunk, és aztán 12 óra 20 perckor folytatódik a rendezvényünk Vicsek Ferenc előadásával. Egy kis kávéval tudnak felfrissülni, maradjanak velünk a rendezvény további részeire is. Köszönöm szépen! There's some coffee actually.